speaker is the Reverend Alessandra Trotta, who is the moderator of the Waldensian Church. And I'm going to ask Erica Scropper Newbury again to introduce her.
Alessandra has trained as a lawyer and practiced for a few years. And then obviously she had a call to become poor, and decided to become a deacon. And so she was for the 8 years the president of Centro Diaconale La Noce in Palermo. And this relates to our friends who are in charge of the connections, the Al and Rachel, who are now married, and then she went to become the president of Ocemi, which is a Methodist equivalent, more or less, of Tavola Valdese, but they are joined. Complicated to explain. So anyway, high-level place, or maybe the highest. And then she humbly decided to be a minister in charge of churches in Naples. Eventually, she became, I'm just saying a few things she did. She became a minister, acting minister in Naples, became member of the Tavola Valdese, and now she is moderator of the Waldensian Church, the first Methodist and the second woman. And she's doing very well. But unfortunately, our friend COVID came in this terrible year. So she's going to tell us a bit about how she managed to survive and do things in 2020. Alessandra.
Thank you, Erica. First of all, let me say how great is my pleasure to be with you today, to take part in this meeting of the Waldensian Church Mission, to have the opportunity to see again so many good friends who shared significant parts of my past service in the church, in Sicily, in Rome, and some other places. And of course, to have the opportunity to tell you all, thank you for your love, for your care, for your support for our church in Italy. In a few days, it will be the 17th of February, as you know, because of the calendar, but as you probably know, this is also a date of a significant celebration for Waldensian and Methodist churches in Italy, but in general for Protestant churches in Italy. It's the celebration of recognition of civil rights for Waldensian and Jewish in 1848, but is especially for us a time of renovation every year of our strong commitment for freedom, for human rights in our country and everywhere. Nobody can say, unfortunately, in this moment, how it will be possible to celebrate. And I look at Pastor Pasquet, that probably is involved in this moment with his church in decision about if it will be possible to light the fire. Okay, this is impossible to say in this moment, I can imagine no. But it's also impossible to forget what happened exactly 1 year ago when churches in the Waldensian Valley couldn't light the traditional fires for another reason, because of dryness. But it was possible to have gatherings, to have a traditional procession, to celebrate. I preached last year, the 17th of February, exactly in the church of Reverend Pasquet. And a week after, I preached in the Waldensian Church of Bergamo, one of the most affected city in the first phase of pandemic. And I was the last preacher in presence for several months in that city, in that church, because exactly that Sunday, when I was there, started the total lockdown before in that region, in Lombardia, and a week after in every part of Italy. And this memory is necessary because you asked me to talk about my first period of moderator of Tavola Valdese, the Waldensian General Board, And for me, it's impossible. I think that you can understand, because it's a common experience, to do this regardless the incredible, dramatic situation started exactly 1 year ago. That was a real turning point in the life of everybody and also in the life of the church. A cut between a before and an after, with the difficulty to remember even what we were working on before. The line of reflection, the front of ordinary and extraordinary commitment in the church and perhaps in the personal life of each one. Some people ask me sometimes, if you had known about what was going to happen, would have you accepted to be nominated for the role of moderator? I generally answer that, of course, nobody could imagine and recommend the first year in this way. But what finally convinced me to accept the nomination in the August 2019 what was the trust in the system of the church. I thought that the church that calls you and elects you takes its responsibilities in recognition and discernment of gifts that are necessary, but also in supporting through a real dimension of collegiality that I now can say was strongly manifested also in the worst period of the emergency. And moreover, I was expert enough about the life of our little beloved church to imagine a very complex role that calls to face many difficulties in a church always poised among tension, among precariousness, where finally emergency are for us the normal condition of the church. Growing up in a similar church strengthened the capacity of resistance that help to survive. But of course, the problem is that survive is not enough. I think that this crisis calls everybody in the church more and more not to be settled for surviving. This crisis push to look for a renewed and far-sighted vision that, of course, are questioning in several ways all the level, the dimension of the life and the mission of our little church. But because I'm also under the pressure of Erika, like Leslie, and it's impossible, of course, in this moment to go deeper in this reflection, and I don't want to share with you just the list of problems and difficulties that are the reality. They are the reality of this time. I prefer today just to share with you 3 glimpses on some of the experience that encouraged me to go on with hope in this time. And I didn't think before, but now I realize that for a strange line, to all these experiences are related in some way with the some of the most invisible victims of pandemic. The first glimpse is about something that happens immediately after the total lockdown. In the first days in Rome, in the place where there is the central office of our church, one of the central offices of our church where I live. And you, I think, can imagine the chaotic place that are the surroundings of the central station in Rome, big touristic city, full of people come and go, the traffic noise, the smell of coffee and croissant in the air, the colorful street vendors. And suddenly one day, the shocked and shocking silence, the deserted roads, everything closed, the total lockdown was really a shocked experience. And in this spectral scene, only the movement of the only people who don't have any house where to close in, the homeless, that were also the only person who didn't know what was happening in Italy. Suddenly disappear all the network that probably was the surviving network for these people, and they didn't know why. The shops were closed, the people that generally helped disappeared, and so on. And while in the palace of the governor, the discussion about the necessary activities allowed was going on, while instruction for our local churches during the lockdown were being studied in the central office of the church, in the midst of the fear of everybody for the unknown danger and risk, a little group of the team of Methodist and Waldensian volunteers in Rome, who in the last 3 years, every Sunday morning before the worship, have been carrying on a service for homeless called Breakfast Time, with a strong determination, claimed every day the right to continue in this service. They claim in front of the uncertainty of local authorities and police station, who said, I don't know, we are waiting for a ministerial circular. And as you know, in Italy, nobody is possible to do without a ministerial circular, in front of the caution of the church council, and in front of the hesitation of Tavola Valdese too, that needed the time for consultation. But they said, there is no time. People are hungry. What is more necessary than this? But we ask for a fair sharing of responsibility in answering to this question, because we don't act by ourselves. We commit the testimony of the church in this service. And they finally won all resistance. We together accepted to take the risk in the uncertainty. I signed an authorization and a declaration that described the kind of service. Anyway, denouncing this decision with transparency to the authorities, asking to formally recognize that helping the invisible was a necessity, was a priority. And finally, it happened. But in the while, the volunteers were in the street again, meeting about 100 people every time. They were known, and some people they never seen before, a lot of people never seen before. Personal stories to listen to, but also a lot of explanation and instruction to give. What was happening in our country, the terrible virus, the necessity to protect themselves and the others, distances, mask, hygiene. So invisible for the others, a priority for who are able to take a risk and to act in order to restore dignity also in an uncertain situation. The second experience, the second glimpse, is about another category of the most invisible victim of this pandemic, that are children and teenagers. More than we can think. And this is the example, the witness, for me really moving, of many, many teachers, educators, therapists in our diaconal institution, like Servizio Cristiano in Riesi, like La Noce in Palermo, like Centro Nitti, Casa Mia in Naples, who totally committed themselves with passion, with dedication, with a lot of creativity, in order to keep connection with the children, the teenager, in order to give continuity in the care and to strengthen resilience of children and teenagers, especially that of that lives in the more risky context, where the possibility of a real development of capacities, of competencies, and to go on in the process of emancipation depend really on the opportunity to come out of very deprived and oppressive familiar and social context. And they are isolated in the house, and very often horrible house. So this is another example for me, very encouraging. The third glimpse is of these days, and is related what Leslie talked about before. As Tavola Valdese, we are receiving every day a lot from many members of our churches, the question about what we are doing, what we think to do for helping in the dramatic situation of the refugees in Bosnia, where a great number of refugees that lived in a camp that were destroyed by a fire about 1 month ago, and now are abandoned in the cold and the frost, without food, without anything, and in the total indifference of local and European authorities. Okay, I can say that Tavola Valdese, with the Federation of Protestant Churches in Italy, is thinking, is committed in organize an intervention in this scenario. And we are quite ready to start, but we are also pushing our government to authorize, if possible, a little humanitarian corridor for the most vulnerable or fragile of this group. But what was really encouraging for me is to think that in our local churches, in our members, the normal members of our churches that probably are facing difficulties in their personal life, a lot of difficulties in the life also of the congregation, look for something out of the bubble in which we have the risk to be closed. Look at the world around, continue to take care and to pay attention at the world out of this bubble. For me, is another encouraging witness. And I really, and I really feel great gratitude for this example and others similar that are happening around the mission and the life of our church. I every day pray that God really to continue to guide not only our church. I hope every Christian church all over the world in this moment of closed houses, very often closed churches like a place of worship, of course, not as the real reality of being a church, to continue to keep open eyes and open hearts and to be out of the bubble, because there is out of our bubble an invisible world. It was always invisible, if you think. But in this moment, it affords to be more and more invisible than in the past. And I think that is a great temptation that I hope our God help us to resist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. We have, and for very inspiring and stimulating thoughts about the opportunities and the challenges that are presented by the pandemic, and how, you know, other people's concerns and activation can inspire us to our own efforts. Is there any we have a minute or two, so if anybody wants to make a comment or a question to Alessandra. Jennifer.
Thank you, Alexandra. Can you tell me if you've come across the work of the community of Sant'Egidio in helping with the refugees and the Lampedusa issues?
Okay. Yes, we share with community of Sant'Egidio the project of humanitarian corridor from Libya, from Lebanon, and now we are trying together to start a new humanitarian corridor from Libya. Of course, in this moment, so this big challenge is going on. In this moment, is very difficult because of the lockdown and the difficulty of traveling.
Yes.
But people in the Mediterranean Sea are continuing to die. So it's another reason why we are pushing our government not to stop this project, not because they want to stop. The Italian government finally decided to support this project. Finally, they think that is a good project, and I hope that I am presenting this example in front of the European Parliament, the European Union, as a model that can be expanded all around Europe. But in this moment, we are struggling. And unfortunately, the disaster in the Mediterranean Sea doesn't stop. So yes, we are working together with Comunità di Sant'Egidio with difficulties in this moment.
Thank you, because it was immensely heartwarming and encouraging to see the work that was being done in southern Sicily when some Cambridge Methodists went with Tim to Sicily. Thank you.
So thank you again to Alessandra, and thank you, Jennifer, for your comment and question.